Hello and welcome to Sophie & Co. I'm Sophie Shepard-Nazi. Migration has always been seen as a way to find a better living. Very often it meant fleeing from the troubles of your homeland. Recent conflicts and economic shakeups have brought millions of migrants to Europe and stirred up strong anti-migrant feelings. Can the new neighbors live in peace, and what should be done for that?
An Arab Spring tide, an unprecedented population wave, exposing Fortress Europe's policy failures. Immigration is changing and challenging Europe, polarizing its politics and unsettling its societies. How can extremism be sidelined and the fear factor eliminated from the European front lines?
Our guest today is Tony Robinson, who used to be the face and leader of the English Defence League street protest movement, known for its strong anti-Islam stance. Tony, it's great to have you on this program today. Now, your recent departure from the English Defence League surprised, if not shocked, both your supporters and opponents. Looking back, are you proud of the EDL leadership or disillusioned with it?
I'm proud of forming the English Defence League completely. For too many years in this country, working class people have been ignored and no one's been listening to their voice. And within 4 years, we've built up so much so that people around the world have heard what we're saying. They've heard how we feel, how we're living down at the bottom, and there's a massive gap between how people are living and what politicians dare speak about. No politicians or none of our political elected leaders will dare to criticise and say the things that need to be said. So we've formed this organisation. It was created for the right reasons. It was born out of passion in defence of our armed forces. And we've progressed and we've brought many. If you look back at all the things we've been highlighting, whether it be Muslim paedophile grooming gangs, which are now being tackled and smashed from one end of the country to the other, they were ignored, accommodated and facilitated in a conspiracy of silence from religious leaders to police leaders, political leaders for 20 years. Only now are they being tackled. Many issues, whether it be FGM, each topic we've brought to the forefront, which has been affecting us in our communities, has now, we've been proven right and proven correct. And I believe we've created a platform and a voice. And by leaving, I've made the decision of really how we get to our end goal, which is we don't want conflict in this country, but we're heading there, and that's reality. Reality is, and that's fear, and that's it's terrifying to think of what the next 20, 30 years may hold for the next generation of youth in our country, with complete polarised communities and complete non-integration and complete segregation. And now I want to, by leaving, work out a way if we can solve that. We've made a noise about it, and that's what we were doing for years.
So, Tommy, are you going to attend future EDL marches?
I will not be attending future English Defence League marches, no. If I thought that was the right way to continue going, I would still be leader of the English Defence League. So,
here's what we have right now. Many in the EDL think you're a coward and a traitor, and you appear no closer to those who have long opposed. You have long opposed. So you're threatened kind of from both sides. Which way will you go next? Are you going to maybe get to know the Muslim community better?
No, what I want to do is take an opportunity to take this mainstream. Basically, what we've been saying has been criticised or being ignored and pushed to the margin because of the far-right extremist tag that they've managed to give us, and due to a minority of elements that come to our demonstrations. And these matters are too serious to be dismissed. So what I want to do is put it in the mainstream and make sure people listen to what we're saying rather than ignoring and dismissing. And I think already we're getting there, that since leaving the English Defence League, I believe people are listening now to what we've been saying, rather than dismissing us after 2 minutes of hearing what we're saying, just saying, oh, they're racist or they're far right or they're hooligans, which is what they've managed to stereotype many members of the organisation with, which is not a true reflection of the people within the movement. That we have had our problems. We didn't plan this. We started a movement that went so big, so quick. We've learnt along the way. We've made mistakes along the way. But what we want to do now is work out the best way to use it. And yeah, we will need to work, we have to work with reformists and true moderate Muslims in this country. What we see in this country is that our government seems to be swayed by Saudi petrol money. We see the representatives that we see on TV representing the Muslim community are usually extreme or have links to Muslim brotherhoods, Islamist organisations, which we don't want. And I believe there's many Muslims in this country that don't want that either. And we want to bridge the gap now and have a united front against extremism.
Can I ask you something? I see
while still tackling the real core issues of why we formed. We're going to stay true to ourselves.
Tommy, I see you have a little bruise on your nose. Did it appear there? Did this has anything to do with you leaving the EDL?
I've always got a bruise on my nose. Over the last 4.5 years, every time I go out of my house, I get a confrontation. I live in Luton Town. It's been named as the heartland of militant Islam in Britain, in Europe actually. It's where the 7/7 suicide bombers left from. It's the fertiliser bomb plot, the Stockholm bomber. They've all been radicalised in my hometown. So, yes, I have been attacked since leaving the English Defence League.
But who attacks you mostly? Who are the attackers?
Yes, I will. Yeah.
Who are the people who beat you up?
The problem we have. It was hostile Muslim youth. The problem we have, which we're trying to highlight, is an Islamist ideology. But at the same time as having an Islamist ideology, we have a very hostile attitude by general Muslim youth against non-Muslims. It's breeding a hostility. So we have to get to the bottom of that, of why we have that in our country, and it's causing big problems up and down the country in many communities, which is why there's this resentment going on. Mm-hmm. But of course, I have been threatened by people from the genuine far right. What we're doing in this country is anyone who's critical of Islam, we're calling far right, which is dangerous, which we shouldn't be doing, because they're genuine fears and concerns. There is a legitimate far right that represent 5% of the threat of this country, but the 95% threat to this country is from Islamist terrorist ideology. Now, the genuine far right are outraged with me because they were outraged with me for the last 4.5 years. They've been on the fringes of the English Defence League, trying to hijack it, trying to get there, sway and direct it in the way that they want to go, which is not what I've been wanting to do from day one. I believe in an all-inclusive society. They haven't been happy with that. They've hated me. I've had attacks from the far right for 4.5 years. They believe I'm a race traitor. And as you just said now, with people saying I'm a coward or a traitor, I am going to move forward in attacking and defeating the Islamist ideology in this country. It's not cowardice. The decision we made was the hardest decision. What would have been more cowardice is just to leave, which would have made my family a lot happier. But by doing the move we made, by sitting with Quilliam, it sends a strong message of what we see as the way forward in uniting communities to tackle the extremist elements within all communities.
Now, your stance on Muslim ideology has softened somewhat from what I understand. What do you think of it now? What do you make of Islam as of now?
Well, actually, my stance hasn't actually dampened or softened at all, if people listen to what I say. What I've been saying for 4.5 years, which may have been distorted or lost in translation due to actions at demonstrations, is what I'm saying now. It's a fact that I don't hate Muslims. I believe Muslims are the first victims of Islamist ideology. They're also victims of terrorism. And there's a big struggle going on, not just in this country, it's going on across Europe, it's going on across the world, between decent, moderate Muslims and Salafist, Wahhabi, extremist sects of Islam. And it's a struggle that I believe the moderates may lose, as they've lost in many, many countries. But then we've seen uprising in Egypt and certain places like that. Now, to succeed in this country, we have to support and stand with the Muslims that wish to take on this extremist ideology and political Islam, which is what we've done by making this move. So my stance is the same. My stance is that there are great Muslims, but there is a serious problem embedded within the ideology, which is being used, it's being manipulated with Saudi money, and it needs tackling, and we shouldn't shy away from tackling these issues. And we've got no politicians brave enough to even criticise or point out the problem. No one can even identify the problem. If you can't identify it, you're not going to solve it. But keep hiding and telling everyone that we're a multicultural love nest and everything's working just great, just adding to the problem.
I always wanted to ask you, have you read the Quran yourself?
I've read the Quran, yes. I've read the Quran. I was quite surprised with many of the things I found in the Quran. 14 times it says that you can take non-Muslim women as sexual slaves. With the Muslim grooming paedophile rings in this country, we have Muslim men taking non-Muslim women as sexual slaves. So maybe it's got nothing to do with that scripture. But maybe it's being manipulated in a way to justify the way these men are carrying on. So there was many things that alarmed me. Obviously, it's all down to interpretation, because there's many other Muslims in this country who follow the same Quran, who don't want to chop people's heads off or murder and kill.
It has to be interpretation, because you know what took place during the Crusades in the Middle Ages wasn't propagated in Bible either, so it has to be a question of interpreting things the right way. But anyways, you say both anti and pro-Islam movements are adding to a problem no one is solving, right? So what is the problem? Do you have a solution?
Do I have a solution?
Yeah.
If someone wants to be an Islamist in this country, we need to make it very, very difficult for them. We do not need to be setting up and legitimising and allowing 100 Sharia law courts in this country. We need to take a tough stance against all of it. Right now, we have immigrants coming into this country who we don't know if even Samantha Braithwaite could have walked into this country. We're just adding to the problem. We don't know, mosques are not regulated or moderated in any way in this country. So every time we see an undercover documentary, every single time, I think last week we saw that 18 out of 56 mosques agreed to marry children, Muslim young 14-year-old girls, to men. So every time we see it, we see hatred, we see homophobia, we see all these problems, and no one's got a solution to even tackling the problems, but no one even wants to halt them or try and stop them. They just want to keep building, allowing Saudi Arabia, Qatar and Iran to fund millions and millions of pounds worth of building of mosques in this country, where then they have madrasas, where at current we have 100,000 4 to 16-year-old children who are being schooled in these madrasas, which is encouraging complete non-integration within this society. It's not going to work. So to at least tackle the problem, we have to establish how we can attempt to solve it. And that's by halting the influx of foreign money coming into this country to build religious institutions. That's all religious institutions.
Tommy, I'm going to ask you to be more precise, and I'll tell you why. Because in other European countries, for instance in France, it's not just a case of mosques being monitored, right? But women aren't being allowed to wear headscarves in the universities. So are you just against the extreme forms of Islam? And would you just be happy to see British Muslims assimilated, be more British?
I'm against it. Yeah, of course, that's what we want. That's what we want, and inevitably that's the end goal. We want integration, but we haven't got it. So we have to find out why we haven't got it and try and bring it about. When you say about women not being allowed to wear headscarves in France, I think that's completely wrong. I have no problem with the hijab. I do have a problem with the burqa. I believe that in certain institutions, in schools, in banks, in airports, in places like this, when it's a security threat, then it should be banned. And when you say in France, I believe that that's in schools that they have no religious wear. I don't believe that 6 and 7-year-old children should be wearing hijabs. But if an adult lady wishes to wear one, then so be it. No one in this country actually cares if a Muslim wants to practice their religion in their own faith, in their own way. It's when it starts dominating ours, and we have a threat to our culture and our belief, and we have these Sharia zones where people are violently enforcing it, and this indoctrination of young children to hate Britain, which is what we're seeing.
All right, we're going to take a short break now. We'll be back with Tommy Robinson, the founder and former leader of the English Defence League, to find out whether Muslims could become the target for a new breed of fascism. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm talking to Tony Robinson, founder of the notorious English Defence League, which he recently has left. Good to have you back. Now, the EDL is labeled as a neo-Nazi movement. Could the way the organization operates right now be fueling new Anders Breiviks?
The EDL is not actually labelled as a neo-Nazi organisation. Media and far-left organisations may wish to do that, but the Metropolitan Police Force have a extremism unit which classifies organisations far right, far left. We have groups like the National Front who are extreme far right, then we have the British National Party who are far right, and the EDL is smack bang in the centre. So it's not a Nazi organisation. Yes, it's had its problems where we've fought from within to keep Nazis out of the organisation. Britain doesn't really have the same similar problems across Europe with neo-Nazis being as powerful and as strong as they are in other countries. And we're blessed for that, really. But we do have a growing problem which will grow with the Islamist threat, because when we take away any platform for a healthy centre for a debate by labelling anyone who says anything as far right, we actually drive and push people to the far right, which is what we're hoping to do, is open up a healthy platform. And when you talk about Anders Breivik, if you take his manifesto, I think it was page 1683, he described the English Defence League as naive fools. He said that the two ideologies can never be reconciled, and we believe democracy can solve the problems, and that we also welcome people from Africa and different continents to be leaders within the organisation, which he was completely opposed to. So really trying to liken it with Anders Breivik is it's quite petty, really. It's miles apart.
No, I'm not trying to equal it to Anders Breivik. I'm just saying, do you think a movement such as EDL could breed someone like him? I'm not saying it's a fascist movement, but it has been labelled by many as you know.
Well, yeah, right, okay.
But anyways,
it has been labelled, yeah.
Yeah, but anyways,
okay.
Why
when you say if we look what bred. And what bred Anders Breivik was a silence from anyone to tackle the issue. He said that. He actually blamed the media. He blamed the media for his reasoning for why he done it. Now, do I believe that if we continue down the path, yeah, we will create monsters in this country as well as in Europe, monsters like Anders Breivik.
So what you're saying is that Breiviks are actually bred by a government's ignorance to attend to immigration issues. Are you and your calls being heard by the ruling elite?
What I'm saying is that's what he said, not what I'm saying. That's what he said, his reasoning for doing it. We've been hoping for 4.5 years that by getting out on the street, we sort of like label it as a cry for help so that people listen to how we're living. Because the government are not living in towns and cities like Luton, where I come from. They're miles apart and they're so out of touch with what it's like. And I don't think anyone's really got their finger on the pulse of the amount of resentment and anger. When I look around my country and I see what's happening to it, it hurts. It can get me emotional when I see what's becoming of our great country. And we don't want that. I don't want that. And as a father, as every father in this country should have a duty to hand down a safe and prosperous Britain to the next generation. And we're failing miserably in that duty. Unlike what our forefathers died and sacrificed themselves for, we are failing due to this era that's been created of political correctness and cultural sensitivity, where people are too scared to even speak about these issues. Because we don't want conflict, and inevitably the way things are going, they're heading towards conflict. And everything we want to do is to avoid that. But to avoid it, we need to really get to deep root cause of the problems and at least be able to discuss them and try and work out solutions to them, not just burying them under the carpet and keep hoping that they'll go away, because they won't go away. And as demographics in this country are increasing, the Islamic community is increasing, within that community the problems are increasing, the resentment from the non-Muslim community is increasing, it's not heading down a good path.
In your hometown, Luton, white Britons are actually an ethnic minority. Could that be soon the same for Europe as a whole?
It will be the same. It's not could it? It will be. Demographic statistics, this is not scaremongering, this is facts. On average, I know in Britain, a Muslim community having 5.6 children, non-Muslims having 1.3. Now, that wouldn't really be a problem if we didn't have all these problems that are associated with it. Now, yeah, in Luton, white Britons are an ethnic minority. That actually doesn't bother me in the hometown that I've grown up in. It's a multicultural town. I believe I've benefited from that. But a culture, with the Islamic community, what we have is, when we see the growth of Islam across Europe, within that culture, the negative things that are coming with it, and it's changing the whole area, it's changing the rules, it's changing the law, it's changing the food. A lot of things are changing that are so different. And they're the issues that people need to be expressed. A lot of people are fearful. You see the matter you're talking about. A lot of people are worried. And they wouldn't be worried if, when we look to Islamic leaders, such as when we saw different Islamic leaders, the Iranian president saying that Islam will conquer Europe through the woman's womb. This is not things that we're saying. Well, you can just go online and you can listen to even Khalid Malik in this country, who was the second in charge of Gordon Brown. In a speech, he says, in 2001 we had 1 Muslim MP, in 2003 we had 2 Muslim MPs, in 2005 we had 6 Muslim MPs, in 2010 we had 10 Muslim MPs. He says within 20 years every MP in this country will be Muslim, and in between saying each thing he says Inshallah, which is Allah willing. So what he's saying is that Allah is willing them to take over our parliament and our government. And then he says within 30 years the Prime Minister of this country would share our faith. Now, that's what he's saying. It's not what we're saying, it's what they're saying. Now, should we be fearful of that? Well, we don't vote based on religion. We keep religion and politics need to be completely separated. But with the Islamic community, that's not what's happening. So what we will see is people voting purely because he's a Muslim. And that's what Khalid Malik is telling us. So we can look to any country in Europe and we find Muslim leaders and community leaders saying these sort of things. And if Muslim leaders spend 95% of the time attacking people who are criticising Islam, whereas if they spent 95% of their time attacking the problems within the ideology and within their communities, there'd be no need for people like ourselves, organisations that I formed, because we could solve the problems. So I think there needs to be a revolution within Muslims, within Europe, to see that the road we're going down is not a pretty one. And if they want freedom, they want democracy, and they want liberty, and they want all these great things that they come to the Western world for, then they need to stand up.
Tommy, do you think a European country in any time in the future could actually elect a Muslim president?
Yes, of course it will. Yeah, it will. It's not if. What we've seen in Belgium recently is we've seen the creation of a Sharia party, an extremist Islamist section similar to what we have in this country of Anjem Choudhury. We've seen them form a political party, and they've been voted in by Muslims. So, in a way, certain sections of the Islamic community will wish to use our democracy to end our democracy. Because we've seen undercover documentaries in Tower Hamlets, which has been called the Islamic borough of Tower Hamlets, where the mayor, Lutfi Rahman, was kicked out of the Labour Party for his extremist ties and links. His spiritual leader describes all non-Muslims as filthy cattle. All these problems, so he's an extremist with all these links to IFE, all these organisations who wish to get a caliphate state and the introduction of Sharia law in Britain. He's the mayor in charge of £1 billion budget because he has been elected to that position. And then as soon as he's got into his position, he started siphoning the funding away from any moderate Islamic organisations, any real moderates which are in uproar, and they're upset by what's going on there. But the money, taxpayers' money, has been siphoned away to Islamist groups, to madrasas. And that needs to be seen as a blueprint for towns and cities across this country and Europe. So when we look to what's going on, well, if you look at beThe in this country, who are a political organisation, they had a conference in 2007. They had 10,000 people at their conference out of a population of just 3% of the country. Now, the Labour Party, they couldn't even get 10,000 people. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to politics and the political sway within the Islamic community, yeah, it's worrying.
You know,
beThe, by the way, are an extremist organisation which are banned in many European countries, but given the free roam to reign in our country.
Mm-hmm. Many critics, just like yourself, also say that Europe is changing greatly because of immigration, and they believe of culture, lifestyle, general behaviour is changing around the major cities in Europe. So you don't believe there could be a peaceful makeover of Europe?
There could be a peaceful makeover if we tackle it now. If we leave it at current, I know in this country we have 5% of the population are Muslim. If we wait until there's 20 to 25% and then we start trying to tackle these hardcore issues of outlawing Sharia, banning the burqa, all these sort of issues that need addressing, we won't be able to. Mm-hmm. We won't be able to. So we need to get to grips with it now. We need to remove Islamist voices from communities. We need to stop empowering them by supporting them and working with them at government levels and local council levels. And we need to empower. There's many Muslim voices in this country who are opposed to all the things that I'm opposed to. We need to empower them. We need to call on Muslims to stand up, because if they wish to live in Britain and we wish to have a harmonious society and a cohesive society, we need to change the direction we're going down. And obviously, to bring about change, people's feelings get hurt. And this is, right where we're at the minute, it's not a time for tiptoeing around people's feet. It's a time for stamping on their feet. And saying these are the hardcore issues that we have to solve if we wish to avoid massive, massive civil disorder or big problems in the future. And that's where we're trying to get to now, is to solve these problems. Do I believe that they can be solved? I hope so. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but Tony, the other side of this story, and the major concern from the other side is, of course, the return of fascism, but this time with Muslims as a target. And I'm not talking about Britain in particular, but in Europe.
Yeah, well, if you look across Europe, what you see is the fastest growing political parties in every single country are the anti-Islamist political parties. Now, why? Why is that? I'd say, why is that? Because everyone in all these countries across Europe feel the same. They feel like we haven't been asked anything. We feel like we're being treated as second-class citizens. And that's how we feel. And there's a two-tier system going on across the board. You see Marine Le Pen predicted to be the next leader in France. It's across the country. And that's because there's a problem. So unless they tackle the problem, people would be pushed further and further to that way of thinking. And in Europe, yeah, what surprised me is when I formed the English Defence League, I started then talking to other European groups and looking into what was happening. I was appalled and disgraced and shocked with what's happening in Sweden, in Malmo, in all these different cities in France. I was shocked to see when I started opening my eyes to the problems that are being occurred. And what we have to ask ourselves is, we've had immigration into Britain. We've had the Sikh community, the Hindu community, the West Indian community, the Irish community. We haven't had these same problems and these same issues. So the issues are coming from the Islamist ideology, which is being allowed to flourish and spread across Europe, unchallenged. And what it's not just being allowed, it's being facilitated and supported by a hard left, far left agenda, which many of these far left communist sort of Marxist organisations, which are very prominent in Europe as well, are siding with the Islamists because they hate democracy, they hate the rule of law. They see it as the biggest way of bringing down all of the things that we cherish, our freedoms that we enjoy. There's like a very loose coalition from organisations you wouldn't think would have a coalition across Europe, and what that is adding to is the rise of far-right politics.
Thank you so much for this interview, and that's it for today, folks. Our guest was Tommy Robinson, founder and former head of EDL. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next edition of Sophie & Co.